Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are about to begin studying chapter 28 of Tanya. Just the 3 points that we discovered last 2 weeks, chapter 27. We spoke about you can only fight the evil with joy. So no matter what excuse the evil is putting in our way, it should not cause us to be depressed or to be sad, but rather realize that we have a chance to change and get better. Number two, sometimes we are leaning towards depression because we do not understand our space where we are vis-a-vis our relationship with God or the evil in our life. And number three, we are created, all of us who are Beinoni, not a tzaddik, to fight a battle. We are soldiers, and therefore there will be challenges. If we conquer the border and we moved 50 feet, tomorrow morning we're going to move another 50 feet, and the next day another 50 feet. Sometimes we have to retreat, sometimes we get injured, but as soon as we can get up, got to keep fighting. If anyone is waiting for the moment where the evil will not fight us, they don't understand the way life is. And therefore, accepting it will enable us to be good soldiers. And the rabbi used the metaphor of food, tasty food. You have sweet and you have savory. Sweet is once you want to come down, relax, you take something sweet. Savory is to be able to dig in and enjoy it with in a certain way much deeper than sweet. That's why for sweetness there is some type of a limit. Savory, you can keep going as much because that is reaching far deeper. However, it comes only amidst a challenge. It's challenging your taste buds. And that's why there are multitude of flavors in sweetness, not in sweetness, in savory. And that's the idea. A tzaddik is like sweet sugar. A Beinoni, or someone who is striving to be a Beinoni, is like savory. And therefore, expect continuously to improve yourself, to fight, to get better, to fall, to get up, to try and keep moving as hard as you can. In chapter 28, the rabbi is going to devote one specific topic, and that is, how do I deal with evil thoughts or lustful thoughts that fall into my mind in a time when it is inappropriate? For example, doing prayer, doing study of Torah. Everyone who experienced prayer can tell you that the mind wanders. There is no doubt that the mind wanders. But the question is, sometimes it's forbidden thoughts, and sometimes you wonder, will it never ever stop? Will I be able to pray for 15 minutes continuously with concentrating on the meaning of what I say? Same is about study. Why is it so hard to study Torah without getting distracted with evil thoughts? So the chapter is going to be divided into 3 parts, or 4 parts actually. We're going to speak about 4 parts, and I really am aiming to cover the whole chapter today. Number 1, do we have control over our mind? Can we control our thoughts? And we discovered in chapter 12 that a Beinoni has control over his thought, speech, and action. Remember, we spoke about the essence of the neshama of the soul and the garments of the soul. The garments are thought, speech, and action. Just like you change your garments, you can change them. So we discovered that the first thought that falls into my head, I have no control over. The problem is the second thought. In other words, when my mind gets busy and start thinking about how to hurt somebody or get jealous, or stay away from a kind person, or evil thoughts, when they enter my mind, there was nothing that I could have done to prevent that. The question is, what happens afterwards? Am I able to control my mind? Says no. Stop thinking. Start thinking something else. It is wrong. That's point number one. Number two, we're going to talk about a measure, a way the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritch Maggid were speaking about diverting one's evil thoughts. And the rabbi is going to speak about that method, and the rabbi is going to negate it. The rabbi is going to say that this is totally out of line for us. And we will discover the method, and the rabbi will explain why it's not going to work. Number three, does the fact that I have evil or lustful thoughts a reflection of who I am? Some people think that if I'm thinking about stealing, or I'm thinking about hurting somebody, or jealous, how come that person is more successful or is able to connect to God in such a beautiful way? Those thoughts are a reflection of who my essence is. And the rabbi is going to explain with a good proof that this is not a reflection of the person. His thoughts are totally separate from who the person is. And we will find out where they come from. Number four, if someone is disturbing me from prayer, how do I treat that person? How do I relate to that? Like the evil not letting you pray, or someone in here says, let me tell you a joke. Or someone who tells me, I see that you're praying, but you're faking it. I'm going to not let you fake it anymore. Oh, etc. Everybody has examples when there is a person standing right next to you or against you, and he's going to do as much as whatever they can to prevent you from having kavana, connecting to God during prayer. How do we treat those persons or these events, and how do we deal with them? These are the four concepts that the rabbi is going to share with us in this chapter, all to do with prayer. I'm going to tell you now in the outset that the rabbi is talking about disturbance during prayer or study of Torah, during a holy time. But everything he says applies in our day-to-day life, in the allowed activities that we're engaging in. Are we able to concentrate? When my wife talks to me, will I be able to concentrate without my mind wandering all over the place? How do I deal with someone not letting me have my train of thoughts going properly? Does the fact that I'm thinking evil thoughts is a reflection of who I am or not? So everything we're going to talk about, the rabbi is going to speak directly about prayer and Torah, but they apply also in our day-to-day life. Let's read the introduction to chapter 28 on page 375, and then we'll move to the text of the Rebbe. In the previous chapter, the Alter Rebbe thought that the Beinoni should not be distressed by the occurrence of sinful thoughts in his mind. In other words, during the day, he's thinking about evil thoughts, lustful thoughts, inappropriate thinking. On the contrary, he ought to rejoice, for by repulsing these thoughts, he promptly averting his mind from them, he fulfills the commandment of not going astray after one's heart, and thereby crushes the spirit of the Sitra Achra, consequently causing intense divine pleasure. In during the day, not doing prayer and study of Torah, when the evil thoughts enter and we crush them, we change our mindset, we actually fulfill a mitzvah. God is allowing us to an opportunity to serve him. However, this reasoning can only be applied when such thoughts occur to the Beinoni while engaged in the material pursuits. If, however, they occur to him while occupied in the service of God, for example, while praying or studying the Torah, there are certainly no cause for rejoicing, since they distract him from the divine service. How is he to deal with them in this case? This is the subject of chapter 28. In other words, so in the day doing the mundane activities we discovered last week, he should rejoice. God is giving him an opportunity to serve him during the day. The problem is when it comes to in prayer or study, is engaged in connection to God, and those distractions appear, they are no reason for rejoice. So how is one to deal with evil thoughts entering my mind while engaged in study or prayer to God? Says the Rebbe, even if lustful imagining or other extraneous thoughts occur to him during his service of God, in Torah or prayer with Kavana, he should pay them no attention, but avert his mind from them immediately. Nor should he be so foolish as to engage in sublimation of the midot of the extraneous thought. Sublimation, we're going to talk about, of the midot, we're going to talk about, that's the second way that the Baal Shem Tov was talking about. So says the Rebbe, very simple and plain. If an evil thought enters my mind while I'm engaged in prayer or study, and I said it applies during the day, the best cure is to pay no attention to them and think of something else. The Rebbe and all Chabad Rebbes always would tell people that when you pray and evil thoughts enter your mind, either start paying attention to the words in the text, make sure you read it and don't say it by heart. And number two, get your mind off of it. Don't fight it. Don't say to yourself, as some people might think, as we'll discover soon, I'm an evil person. How dare you do that? Why are you disturbing me? You can come to me during the daytime, not doing prayer. Once you engage even in fighting the evil, you are getting dirty, so to say. You are engulfed in that thought. But what if you stop thinking about it and start thinking about something else? That's called getting rid of the evil thought. And the Rabbi is going to express, and by the way, modern psychology is just exactly in line with what we are studying. As is known, that one can overcome extraneous thoughts by elevating their source. That's called sublimation of the midot. Here is the Rabbi Weinberg's explanation to the sublimation of midot, and I'll explain them a little deeper. For every such thought stems from one of the midot of the animal soul. For example, the midah, the measure of love, in the animal soul gives rise to one's lustful thoughts. The midah of fear gives rise to hatred and fears inappropriate.
Sorry, what is midah exactly?
Midah is measure, or trait. Midah is measure or trait. Rise to hatred and to fear inappropriate to him, and so on. It is therefore written, the Mezritch Magid, I think, is saying that, or the Baal Shem Tov, that when one is disturbed by such a thought, he should determine which midah is its source, and should then refocus the midah on the spiritual aspects of the object of his thoughts. For example, if the extraneous thought of the is a desire for some physical object, one should contemplate that the desirability of the object which he craves is actually a manifestation of the divine power that made it desirable, beautiful, tasty, or whatever. Therefore, rather than applying his desire, that is the midah of love, to the object's physical sheath, he should direct it to the godliness that underlies it. He will thereby elevate the corresponding midah of his animal soul to its divine source, and thus destroy the evil in the thoughts caused by the midah, leaving only the good that is the spark of holiness embedded in them. This is what is meant by sublimating the midot in order to overcome extraneous thoughts. Says the Rebbe, I explained it in a moment. For the Beinoni, however, such an exercise would be sheer foolishness, as the Alter Rebbe explained presently. For such things were intended only for tzaddikim, in whom there do not occur any evil thoughts of their own, evil midot, but only from the midot of others, as he is going to explain. What the Rabbi is saying to us, there is a method the Baal Shem Tov is saying, it's called sublimation of the midah. If I have I hate somebody, and I'm starting thinking about this person, I'm going to answer him, or I'm going to disengage any relationship with that person. In the middle of prayer, then I have to stop for a moment and say to myself, what is the source? What is the root of this thinking, of this mindset? And the root of that thought is fear. Fear. Fear, the essence of fear in holiness is fear of God. So why think about how to hurt somebody or run away from somebody? Let's think about fear of God, how God is great and God pays attention to me. Would I be offending God? Would I be doing something disrespectful to God? In other words, the reason you have a evil thoughts, inappropriate thought in the prayer is for you to be able to elevate that midah, that measure, that trait that exists within you into making it holiness. So if someone is thinking about lusty thoughts, about love, about beauty, in the middle of prayer, you should say, where does that come from? It's because I'm in love with that person, or I want to fall in love with that person, or I want to desire the pleasure of being or eating that chocolate, etc. That comes from love. The source of love is loving God. God created love. So how about I concentrate and contemplate of how to love God? This is called the sublimation of midot, the elevation of midot. Says the Rebbe, it should not be foolish to think that type of method simply because it is who he is and he's unable to elevate something of himself. A prisoner cannot untie himself, release himself from jail. He needs someone outside. I should tell you that today modern psychology uses this method. Whenever someone goes to a psychologist to complain about issues that chase them, they say, let's find the root where it starts from, just like I just shared with you, and let's turn it into positive. Find a positive way to act, to express that anger, that desire to speak a lot, that desire to get anxious. Change it and direct it into a positive activity. And it works very well, provided it's not about a mitzvah, but about a trait or a issue that a person has as a person in his mind or heart. And number two, there is somebody else outside of that person who guides the person in the right direction. But coming from within, especially when it comes to a mitzvah and a sin, this, the Rebbe says, only a tzaddik can do. And the Rabbi is going to go into another topic. So far, so good. Ali, are you able to follow? Okay. The Rabbi is going to say that a tzaddik sometimes would have a strange thought because there is another Jew in the area that belongs to that tree of life where that soul of the tzaddik comes from, and he's unable to overcome those thoughts. So they get the tzaddik to help drive away the thought by having the tzaddik drive it away. But it is a strange outside thought of the tzaddik, therefore he's able to elevate it. But a Beinoni, when he deals with such a thought, it's not it's not outside of the Beinoni, it's the part and parcel of who he is. Therefore, expecting him to be able to divert it into a positive would be foolish. It might work once, twice in a novelty, but it does not consistently, it will not work. Here's what the Rabbi say. Since the tzaddik has transformed the midah of the animal soul, the midot of the animal soul to good, what is a tzaddik, as we discovered before, has no evil. The evil is don't exist. So he doesn't even have a desire to think or speak or do something evil. No evil thought can arise from them. Any evil thought that may arise in his mind, stems from the midot of others. For another individual whose soul root is connected with this tzaddik finds himself in difficulty combating his own evil midot and requires his assistance. This person's evil thought is therefore planted in the mind of the tzaddik, though in the form of a mere abstract letters of thought, and without any feeling of evil attached to it. The tzaddik, recognizing the source of this thought, redirected toward the spiritual realm as explained above, and thereby elevates the midah whence it stems, thus enabling his fellow Jew to overcome his own evil midot. But only the tzaddik can accomplish this, since he himself possesses no evil midot. But as for one that is a Benoni, to whom there occurs an evil thought of his own from the evil that is lodged in the left part of his heart, that is, the evil midot of his animal soul, how can he raise it up to the spiritual realm when he himself is bound below by his desire for the material? Says the Rebbe, it's impossible for me if I am now desiring and I can't wait to hurt someone or to do something that's against Torah, to say, let's find out where it comes from. Oh, it comes from nature of love, from midah, nature of love. Source of love is God. How about I start thinking about loving God? It's not going to work because this is my identity. That sinful thought is the essence of the animal soul. And you cannot just get rid of it by contemplating in a positive. Therefore, the sublimation of midot, says the Rebbe, even though the Rebbe's master was teaching it, he was speaking about a tzaddik, someone who has no evil inclination, and all the evil thoughts entered his mind to elevate them for the sake of someone else who is struggling from the same root of the same tree of soul. But someone who's that part of their own identity, it's impossible to raise themselves. Did you understand so far? Okay. It would therefore be foolish for the Benoni to attempt to rid himself of extraneous thoughts by engaging in the sublimation of the midot. So these are the two parts of this chapter I spoke about. Number one, if you're busy with evil thoughts, stop thinking about it. Don't have anything to do with it. Get used to the idea that I change my mind. It's not right. Let me think about something else. Let me divert my mind from it. Number two, the sublimation of midot, ala'ata midot, as it's called in Hebrew, to elevate the negative thought by getting into the root of that desire and connecting to God through that desire, through that nature, applies only to a tzaddik who has no such desires of evil desires of his own. But a Benoni whose identity is made up with the evil inclination, this is his identity. To be able to elevate it is just foolish. Now the Rebbe goes on to say, should not be making me depressed. If I always think about lustful thoughts, and I think about negative thoughts, getting jealous of someone, why other people are so happy and I'm not, why are they so successful? Isn't that a reflection of who I am? Some people believe that if I can tell what you're thinking about, it will reflect your identity. Yet a person who knows deep inside the way his mind is working, the wheels of his mind are running, he will be able to look inside and say, I'm the most evil person I ever met. Says the Rebbe, this is not the case. Here is point number 3. Yes.
Says to himself, well, I'm no good. They risk things they've done, but you're not going to feel that they have zero value.
I cannot tell you how many people have said to me, you're asking that you don't know of people who are getting depressed just based on their thought process, correct? I cannot tell you how many people tell me how depressed they are and how deep low self-esteem they are, and for no legitimate reason other than the thoughts that go through their mind continuously. The fact that they always desire evil for somebody, The fact that they always cannot stand someone's joy or happiness is what drives them to think. They don't speak that way and they don't do anything about it. But just the thoughts, the mere thoughts that go through their mind, being jealous, unhappy, makes them reflect on the fact that they see themselves lower than any other person. It's a major problem. I also want to add to this. There was a study. You caught me off guard. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know the pretty close to numbers. A study was made when I believe 3,000 people were asked, would you rather receive $1 million, but accept that everyone from their taxes, there is a surplus in the government's funding, and they will give each person in town, every single citizen, $1 million, you too. Or you would rather, because you pay the highest paid taxpayer last year in the city, or you would rather you receive $250,000, but everybody else gets zero. You understand the question that they were asked? You have a choice in your town, in your city. You get 250,000 and everybody gets zero. Or you get $1 million, but everybody else gets $1 million. What would you vote?
For everybody, but I think the answer, they have to be a person can be the guy you go force and say, give you 250 and 0 for everybody else.
Over 80% of the people asked, of course it was anonymous, said they would rather get $250,000 so long as everybody else should not have any, which is extremely foolish. Right, Ali?
What's the entire civilization is that town?
I asked this time. It's foolish, right? Yet 80%. You know why? Because we cannot see someone else's success. That's the way I explain it. There is no other ways of explaining it. I cannot see that other people have exactly as much as I do. I always have to be on top. Those evil thoughts, sometimes when someone contemplates about them, they say to themselves, what kind of an evil person I am? Nobody else is thinking that way, unless they read the study. Otherwise, they think that they are the only one who are thinking that way, not realizing that the vast majority of our society, and that's the next thing that the rabbi is going to address. How is it possible? Everybody around looks like he's praying with proper concentration, and I'm the only one who is not able to read more than 2.5 lines without my mind get distracted. In truth is, everybody has the same issue. However, some people get depressed from that. They lose self-esteem. They create a very low self-esteem, realizing that there is something of there is a defect. There is something that's inappropriate by the way who they are, because their identity as a human being, they should be able to. When you pray to God, you should concentrate on the words. They're not asking you to invent the wheel. To reinvent the wheel. They're asking you just to read the words and think about what you say. Yet, and a line and a half later, your mind is wandering elsewhere and sometimes not in the right places. And that's what the rabbi is going to address now. Says Rabbi, nevertheless, he must not be downhearted, nor feel dejected and despicable because of this occurrence of extraneous thoughts during his service of God, when he ought to be most joyous. The Rebbe is going to fight sadness and melancholy in every which way. This is the last one that he's dealing with. Prayer, evil thoughts, forbidden thoughts that come during prayer or study. He should not get depressed and be sad. On the contrary, he should draw fresh strength and intensify his determination with all his power and pray with concentration, with even greater joy and gladness. Says the Rebbe, if you have evil, forbidden thoughts that enter your mind, first try to get rid of them by stopping to think. Don't fight them. Change your mind and think about something else. In addition, do not get depressed, but quite the opposite. Be happy that this challenge happens. Why? In the realization that the foreign thoughts which occurred to him derived from klipa of the left part of the heart, which wages war within the Benoni against the divine soul within him. He should say to himself, my evil soul is fighting very, very hard. And it is, page 378, it is known that it is the way of combatants who seek to destroy one another, and similarly of wrestlers who aim merely to topple one another, that when one is gaining the upper hand, the other likewise exerts himself with all the resources of his strength in order to prevail. And therefore, in the battle between the divine soul and the animal soul, when the divine soul exerts himself and musters all its strength in prayer, thereby to weaken or even vanquish the animal soul, the klipa of the animal soul too gathers strength to counter it, aiming to confuse and topple the divine soul by means of a foreign thought of its own. Says the Rebbe, the greater the challenge, the greater you are. Because God would not allow for great challenge unless you're clearly connected to God. Let me explain it with a story. Rabbi of Bardichov, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Bardichov, once was told that there is a man that was taken captive by the non-Jews until he has to pay a ransom. Those days it was very common for the owner of the village or of the county to, if people did not pay on time, they would put them in a dungeon, their families, until someone will pay their debt. So what does the rabbi do? He starts collecting. He goes around knocking on doors, as the tradition was, asking people to help. In the middle of collecting, he quit. He stopped and he went home. And now, a couple hours later, it became known that this captive that he was collecting for, it did not exist. The Goyim, the non-Jews, wanted to poke fun of the Jews, so they took one of them on, dressed them like a Jew, make them look like Jewish, and they put shackles on his hands. And they told the neighbors, look, this man is brought into jail, to the dungeon, and the ransom is a lot of money to poke fun. So now people realize that Rabbi of Bardichov was a prophet. He realized long before anybody else knew. He realized it was not for real. So they turned to him and they said, how did you make it? How did you make such a miracle? So he said to them, no miracle, no divine inspiration. I started collecting and it was too easy. Suddenly, everybody is giving me a lot more than I assessed them. They gave me with both hands. Some people usually they give the Torah coin. They gave me with hands full of coins. I said, if it's so easy, it must be not for a mitzvah. Because if it would be for a mitzvah of pidyon shvuim, of redeeming the captive, the evil would come and challenge. It would be difficult. I'll have to beg. They will give me much less than they should have. The fact that they gave me more than they did, it was a sign for me that there is no need. There is no mitzvah to be fulfilled. Did you understand that, Ali? So if everything is a smooth sailing, we say to him, something is not right, unless he's a tzaddik. When you have evil thoughts, says the Rebbe, of course you have to get rid of it, because it's forbidden. But don't get depressed, because it is a sign that the godly soul is fully awakened and connected to God. That's when the evil, if you're busy watching a movie, The evil thought is not going to give you strange thinking because you're busy with the evil thought. It does it when it sees that you are very powerfully connected to God. That's when it throws the wrench in the wheels. So the greater the challenge, the greater the connection to God. That's why in the Chabad, among Chabad rabbis, emissaries, we say if there are no challenge, it means you do nothing. You don't do anything. When you actually do reach out, you will encounter lots of challenges. So a challenge, myself, other rabbis, when we face challenges, we take it with love. We say, this is the best sign that we're doing great. So the evil is finding ways to fight it, to try and stop and prevent. So it not only is not a reflection of the person's lowliness, that he's not as good as other people are, but quite the opposite, that he's doing something in town and therefore everybody is troubling him. There was a Chassid who came to the Tzemach Tzedek. The Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek was a grandson of the Alter Rebbe, the third Chabad Rebbe. And he says, Rabbi, I have a major problem and I need help. And the Rabbi says, what's the big problem you face? He says, I have no desire to study Torah. I know you have to study Torah every day. I have no desire, I can't. And the Rabbi says to him, that's your problem? I have a bigger problem. I have a desire to study Torah. And what the Rebbe said to him is, if you have no desire to study Torah, it means that your Torah study is far greater before God, because it came amidst a challenge, a great, great challenge. For me, it's a pleasure to study Torah. I enjoy so much that the value is far less than someone who achieves study of Torah through great challenges. So he turned to him and he says, I wish I had this challenge because my problem is bigger than you. My problem is that I do have a desire to study Torah. And that's what the Rabbi is saying. When someone faces evil thinking while they pray or study Torah, it is not a reflection of who they are, but quite the opposite. It's a reflection that what they do is touching a nerve by the evil soul. In other words, they're doing very well. And therefore, the evil is trying to stop them. Had they not done much, the evil wouldn't bother them. There would be no trouble. And we see that this is part of the reason that wicked people are extremely successful. Because they act in a wicked way, no one is there to challenge them. Only righteous men who try to put together projects for God's sake. If you are to put a museum for the Holocaust here, if you are to put a musical center here, there will be so much funding. And 98% of it would be from the Jewish people. If you try to open up a Jewish day school, or you try to open up a center for Torah, there will be very few dollars. And the reason is because anything that's positive, the evil would throw the wrench. And therefore will try to make it challenging and hard. So it's not a reflection that it's not so good or it's not the greatest thing. It's quite the opposite. That's the reason we have such a challenge. I hope I made myself clear. Harry, did you understand that?
Yes, so that's the reason why we don't have a kosher restaurant here.
That's it. That's it. That's the reason, because it comes a great. You have many, many good, tasty restaurants, but not one that's kosher. Says the Rebbe. Here is the commentary. The commentator Rabbi Weinberg's. The animal soul, sensing danger in the divine soul's increased efforts in prayer with devotion, contrives to jar one's concentration by conjuring up assorted foreign thoughts in his mind. Thus, the appearance of an extraneous thought during prayer indicates that one's devotion was of sufficient quality to give the animal soul cause for concern. And this realization itself should gladden one and encourage him to continue his effort. So in other words, you have to stop that thinking. But later on, when you go back and do an accounting of your day and how life is, and you say, how is it possible every time I want to pray, my mind is wandering? What's wrong? Am I that low base type of human that the evil is able to take over every time I want to connect to God? And the answer is quite the opposite. When I do connect to God, the evil is fighting it back. Had I not established a good connection to God, the evil wouldn't fight it. This refutes, says the Rebbe, a common error. When foreign thought occurs to some people during prayer, they mistakenly conclude that their prayer is worthless. They say, I can't even concentrate. All my mind is busy with these negative thoughts. My prayer is worthless, there's no value. Says the Rebbe, for if one prayed properly and correctly, so they mistakenly believe, no foreign thought would arise in his mind. Nothing negative would come to my head if I were to be of holy mind of connection to God. They would be correct if there would be but one soul within a person. The same soul that prays, being also the one that thinks and ponders on the foreign thoughts. So if you had one soul, then if that soul is connected to God and immediately in the middle it starts thinking about how to get rid of somebody, how to hurt, how to connect with somebody inappropriately, then you say that soul is faking it, is a hypocrite, because it starts positive, holy, and then it gets involved with negativity. In this case, if the godly soul were truly immersed in prayers, there would be no room within it for foreign thoughts. But in fact, there are two souls, each waging war against the other in the person's mind. The mind, thus, not only is the battleground, but also the prize, the object of the battle between the two souls. Each of them wishes and desires to rule and pervade the mind exclusively. All thoughts of Torah and the fear of God come from the godly soul, while all thoughts of worldly matters derive from the animal soul. So there are two souls. It's fitting perfectly with this week's Torah portion. We read in this week's Torah portion, the first aliyah of the Torah portion, Yitzchak is marrying Rivka, and they are married for how long? 20 years, and they have no children. So they start praying to God, and God blesses them with pregnancy. It says, "Vayitrodzetzu abanim bekirba." She didn't know they were twins. The children were fighting each other. Vatomer, and she said, Im ken lama ze anochi. Who needs it? Who wants pregnancy? That's what she said. Someone who's praying for 20 years. Says Rashi, huh? Says Rashi that when she would go in the street next to a synagogue, the baby would kick and run, try to get out. He wants to go to synagogue. She says, oh, he's a holy man. Then she go across the street. There was a church, an idol place. And again, he starts kicking. She says, I don't want a faker. If I had someone who goes to worship idols, at least everybody will know is true nature. If I had one who studied Torah, it's even better. But to have the same one who goes to study Torah and then goes and worship idols, I don't want that. This is something that's so despicable in Judaism that she would rather not have any child. How does she come down? She goes to the prophet, Shem and Ava, and she says she goes to seek God. Seeking God, meaning the prophet. And the prophet says, don't worry. I have an ultrasound. The ultrasound shows two babies. There are two boys, twins. One runs to synagogue, the other runs to idol, and she's happy now. You can ask, what do you mean she's happy now? One is going to go worship idols, and a murderer and a rapist is going to be the worst, so much so that we don't even know when she died. And one of the reasons is that no one wanted to attend the funeral of her because she's the mother who gave birth to Esau. Esau was a known mobster, criminal. But the fact that there were two, they are fighting each other and each one is pulling in their own direction, it is the way God created them. So let it be. That's acceptable. But if it's one, then that's not a big no-no. And this is exactly what the Rabbi is saying. If you had one soul running the show, then the soul is being a hypocrite. Because if you're connected to God and you care and you pray to God and you thank God, and suddenly you're thinking about buying the new car, or how is it possible somebody has a nicer car than you, or how am I going to be able to get a good meal, or forbidden behavior, then there is a real question about the character of the person. It shows that he is a hypocrite. And that's very despicable. However, if it's two souls, two characters that are opposite each other, and they fight for control, then it makes sense. And it's actually a sign that the holiness is trying to reach closer to God. That's why the evil is putting a lot of efforts to stop it. And therefore, the reflection of the effort from the evil soul is the evil thoughts. But they come only because the godly soul is strong and connected to God. Similarly, in our case, thoughts of prayers are from the divine soul, while foreign thoughts stem from the animal soul. Thus, the occurrence of a foreign thought during prayer is no indication of a fault in the prayer. In fact, the opposite may be true, as the Alter Rebbe explained earlier with the analogy of the two combatants. But if there are indeed two separate souls, why should the extraneous thoughts of one interfere with the devotion of the other? They would not interfere, answered the Rebbe, except that the godly soul is clothed within it with the animal soul, and therefore the godly soul cannot ignore foreign thoughts rising from the animal soul, and thus foreign thoughts disturb one's devotion in prayer. Because they are part of the human, and the mind is being fought about control between the godly and the animal. The godly is allowing the mind to run, and the animal soul jumps in and takes over the helm. This is, to use an example, like a person who is praying with a devotion, while facing him there stands a wicked heathen who chats and speaks to him in order to confuse him. Imagine you staying to prayer. The Rebbe says this is a parable that is being used all the time by Hasidim. Imagine I'm staying to prayer and someone cannot stand that I'm praying to God. So you stand right against me. He says, hey, trying to distract me from praying. Is that a reflection about me, that I'm an evil person, that I'm not connecting appropriately to God, that I'm faking it? Of course not, because he's a stranger trying to stop me. It is no reflection on who am I. So what's the best way to do with that person? As well, ignore him. If you fight him, you lose your time with God. Realize it's two souls, and the animal soul is throwing rocks, trying to stop you. And therefore, by ignoring what you do is you continue on your way, realizing that your true self should allow the godly soul to connect. If the other's intention were not to disturb him, but merely, say, to ask him a question, then he could rid himself of the disturbance simply by responding to the questionnaire. But when the intention is to disturb his prayers, he will gain nothing by responding. If he answers one question, it will promptly be asked for another. He will promptly be asked another. In other words, if someone comes to ask you a question, to share with you an information, to ask you for a date, to take you out, advice, that's acceptable. You can tell him, wait. But if it's someone who's just jealous and don't want you to pray, they'll ask you a question, but as soon as you answer, they'll come up with another question, another question, another question. In other words, the goal is to steal you time, steal you away from God. Surely the best advice in this case would be to answer him neither good nor evil, but rather to act as though he were deaf without hearing. Learn to shut your ears, and this way no one will bother you. And to comply with the verse, answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you too become like him. If you start dealing and conversing with a fool person, you lower yourself to that level. You don't want that. Just as in the analogy of the heathen who disturbs one during prayer, so too, when foreign thoughts enter one's mind while praying, he should answer nothing at all, nor should he engage in argument against the foreign thoughts. That is, he should not occupy himself with mental discussion on the best strategy for countering the foreign thoughts. Why, says the Rebbe? For he who wrestles with a filthy person is bound to become soiled himself, no matter how strong you are. If the person you're fighting is filthy, you're going to get dirty too. So, huh?
Heathen is right.
Heathen is idol worshiper.
Could be a guy because he's standing in shul with you.
Right. But first, it's not in shul. It may be in the marketplace and you study Torah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's say it's is someone who's trying just to prevent you from prayer, has no other agenda. He doesn't want to study Torah. I don't want you to come with him for lunch. He just wants you not to study Torah. He cannot stand that you study Torah. He cannot stand that you pray. Have you had such examples? I had encountered many times. Why do you have to reveal all the secrets? So the point the rabbi is making is, what's the best strategy? Shut your ears. Move on. Tell them, what do they say? The dogs bark and the entourage continues, right? Is there such a, in Hebrew, we say, הכלבים נובחים והשיירה ממשיכה. Let the dogs bark and the entourage can continue and the wagon can keep going. Let them bark. In other words, the evil thought, the negative thought that enters your mind is not a reflection of who you are. And therefore, the first thing to do is stop thinking. It's not to drag you down, to say your identity is imperfect or that you are an evil person, because there are two souls who are trying to fight over the mind, and therefore the evil soul is fighting only when the godly soul is rising, connecting to God. And finally, realize, just like if you have someone that's trying to disturb you from whatever you're busy with, the best thing to do is to ignore. Don't respond. That's what they want. They seek their energy, they derive from you responding. But if you do not respond, you remain quiet, you go on, they will stop doing it, what they're doing. Similarly, in the process of fighting the foreign thoughts, one's mind becomes filled and tainted by it. He should therefore not seek to grapple with it. Instead, he should pretend not to know nor hear the foreign thoughts that occur to him, should dismiss them from his mind. Right? Is that clear? Does it make sense? And strengthen still more the power of his concentration. If now the rabbi is talking about one more thing, if it's very, very hard to concentrate because the mind is busy with the appointment that you're going to have, or how to get rid of someone who is threatening to sue you, there are times that your mind cannot stop from running in the negative way, which is a sin. If, however, he finds it difficult to dismiss them because they distract his mind with great intensity, then he should humble his soul before God and supplicate him in his thought to have compassion upon him in his abundant mercies. He should turn to God and says, God, please have mercy. Please help me get rid of those thoughts. That's the only thing he should do. Like a father who takes pity on his children who stem from his brain, and so should God be compassionate on his soul, and which derives from the mind of God, the attributes of Chokhmah, is explained in chapter 2. To rescue it from the turbulent waters, that is, the thoughts which disturb the soul, this he should do for his own sake, since truly his people are a part of the Lord. We are God's children. Turn to God, says, Daddy, help me. I don't know what to do. I'm unable to. In order that one should not incur divine judgment as to whether he is worthy of God's compassion, the Alter Rebbe advises that one should beseech God mercies for his own sake. Since the soul is a part of God, in aiding the soul, he actually helped himself, so to speak. The question of whether one is deserving of such his aid thus become irrelevant. Another interpretation to seize the words, this he should do for his own sake, not as part of the worshipper's plea, but as a guarantee that God will certainly come to the aid of one who entreats him, and certainly will rescue his soul from the turbulent waters. This is for his own sake, for the soul's veritably a part of God. What the rabbi is saying is, instead of demanding, then God is going to say, let's find out if you deserve. But pleading for God's mercy and say, God, you're my daddy. I'm reflecting you. So why don't you help me to be a much more spiritual person, to have a good reflection of who you are? By doing so, God will help assist us by alleviating those evil thoughts and give us more strength to fight and combat the evil soul. This concludes chapter 28. So that deals with particular evil thoughts during prayer. Chapter 29 is going to 29, 30, 31. We're going to go into the other side of the story, which is about sadness and melancholy and bitterness, that sometimes when and how sadness is applicable or appropriate in the human life. So we will conclude here, and thank you very much. Hopefully we'll meet again next week, same time, same place. Be well, everybody. Good night.